Confirm when on. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Shropshire Council's Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 15th of February. It's housekeeping first. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and to assist people watching or listening online, can I remind members to identify your name and role before speaking. Members, before we start the actual meeting, I just want to update you on some news that we received yesterday, the official release yesterday anyway, that another one of our Shropshire Council and children's homes has been recently inspected by Ofsted and has been judged outstanding in every area. I am sure all members will join with me in thanking the staff both within the home and those that support the facility for their hard work and dedication. Tanya, will you please pass on our thanks and our congratulations on a marvellous outcome. I am so pleased with that. It's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so moving on to the agenda. Number one item, apologies for absence. We don't have any apologies this morning, apart from just to say that I'm aware, Councillor Evans, that Councillor Wilson can't be here to ask his question, so you're going to ask the question on his behalf. Item number two, disclosable interest. Does anybody have any interest they wish to raise for today's meeting? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number three, the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January. I'm happy to propose them. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Ian Dallins, I'll second.
Thank you, Ian. I see no hands in the room. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to the public question time. Tim, am I to assume that you are reading? Yes. So we've got one public question from Sally Tote, which will be read by Tim Pollard. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Her question is this. It was generally understood by the council staff that the return of departments to the Shirehall in 2014 was due to the failure and cost of the policy of dispersal to leased premises. In 2015, the new leader, Malcolm Pegg, therefore considered ongoing options for Shirehall, which included basic refurbishment to acceptable current standards or else a total facelift. The latter was put out to external architects, but guidance on the former was sought internally from the Council's Premises Services Department, who produced a report in January-February 2016, which was submitted to the Cabinet. It is our understanding that this report and the associated cost estimates show that Shirehall was fundamentally fit for purpose, could be upgraded to current standards of appearance and energy performance for a fraction of the facelift costs, making it attractive to potential tenants for areas not required by the Council. Will this report be found and published so that a balanced review of the options is available for members of Shropshire Council to consider?
Thank you, Tim, and the answer will be provided by Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader Councillor Dean Carroll, Cabinet Member for Growth, Regeneration and Housing. Cabinet received a report in December 2017, which was the first more detailed appraisal of the potential to refurbish the Shirehall in recent times. Anything considered prior to that date had focused on critical maintenance requirements and did not address all of the areas required to bring the building up to modern standards, regulations, and be fit for purpose for officers and members. The 2017 report set out within the background 2 investment options and associated costs. This was a public report and is available to view. Further work was progressed up until the point of the key decisions taken at the Council meeting of the 16th of July 2020. In that report, it advised that in the Stage 2 financial business case prepared by Ryder Levitt Bucknell, which identified an estimated cost of £24.1 million. This was on the basis of refurbishing the Shirehall, which was presented to full council in December 2018. Due to inflation and comparable scope of works, the previous costs excluded some work such as fenestration and asbestos, etc., likely to be in excess of £30 to £34 million, as reported in February 2022. Construction-related inflation has increased significantly once again over the previous 12 months, and this figure will have certainly increased further. I should also add that the onset of the pandemic accelerated the hybrid nature of how many of our services operate, and this is also now a deciding factor in the size, scale and nature of our future office accommodation requirements.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Moving on to item number 5, which is member question time. Okay, Councillor Evans, are you going to be very busy today? Because the first question is from Councillor Alex Wagner, and he's not online and he's not in the room. Are you going to be busy?
I know.
You know nothing about this one. Would you like me to get Tim to read
Yes,
it?
please.
Fine.
Sorry, I take your point, Chairman. No, I think
Not
it was
a
the
problem.
officer to read.
Okay, thank you very much. Tim, would you kindly read Councillor Wagner's question, please?
I will. His question is this. Unnecessary and shabby street furniture in Shrewsbury town centre is a... Oh, sorry, that's the heading. Shrewsbury town centre...
You've got time to practice.
Shrewsbury town centre is a fantastic place, full to the brim with heritage and history. Despite this, the streets often seem cluttered with unnecessary and often shabby street furniture and signage. Several residents have gotten in touch to complain about the poor quality of signage on the Wild Cop in particular, with black poles seemingly just used as boards to post largely unuseful information. Another similar example can be found in the number of ugly, brightly coloured signs signalling parking restrictions around Claremont Bank and Welsh Bridge. 5 of these signs are within 10 metres of one another near St Austin's Street car park. In the interest of preserving the heritage of our town centre and creating a friendlier street scene, would Shropshire Council commit to reviewing their existing street furniture, clearing up their shabbier signage and considering adopting new policies on the visual impact of signage?
Thank you, Tim. And to provide the answer, Councillor Ian Nellens.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Nellens, portfolio holder for climate change, the environment and transport. First of all, I'd like to agree that Shrewsbury Town Centre is a fantastic place. Highway authorities, however, must comply with the traffic sign regulations to ensure that signing is correct and appropriate. In locations where a number of streets converge in a small area, there will be a higher concentration of regulatory signage. Without signs located correctly on each street, it is impossible to enforce parking restrictions, which leads to the indiscriminate parking and other issues. Our recent funding bid focuses on signing rationalisation, and if successful, will allow the Council to review signage in towns and identify if there is scope for reducing signing in some locations. Shropshire Council has been working closely with the Shrewsbury bid to identify priority issues such as graffiti on benches and street furniture that needs repainting, and have had teams working in the town centre to address these. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nellens. As Councillor Wagner's not here, I guess we don't have a supplementary question. So moving on, I'm pleased to see Councillor Rosemary Dartman is now with us. The next question coming from her. Rosemary, over to you.
Just like
Yes, sure.
Thanks, right? Correct. I've got it. It's coming. Sorry for that. Clarification is required to some contradictory answers to previous streetlight questions. It was stated that there were 7.25% faults in 20,000 plus lights, equating to 1,440 lamps. Supplementary information as at 4th of February 23 stated 306 total current faults, including 240, that's 80%, overdue. Probably long overdue given the number of lights in my own division out of action for 10 or even 12 months. There are 11 within a 250 metre radius. How many Shropshire lights are currently faulty, and how many of these exceed the 28-day repair target? Why are such long-standing repairs left for many months on end? The press release about LED installations lighting improvement is as welcome as it is ambitious. Telford and Wrekin Council came first among local authorities in the National Highway Satisfaction Survey 2022, rated 7% above average, with 2-day repair targets. Yet in all streetlight categories, Shropshire Council was around 5% below the average, I think 4 in some cases. T&W have replaced 95% of their 24,400 lights with LEDs since 2018, delivering financial and CO2 emissions savings. Clearly, T&W have a geographical advantage, but does this alone explain why it's taken 10 years to update just 30% of Shropshire lighting to LED? Can the portfolio holder please explain why this service has become so poor, why the decline was not noticed and rectified earlier? Is he certain that the performance indicators and other monitoring of the Kia contract is fit for purpose? Is he satisfied there is an effective working relationship between highways officers, WSP and Kia staff concerned with street lighting?
Thank you, Rosemary. Answer provided by Councillor Richard Marshall.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Richard Marshall, portfolio holder for the Highways and Regulatory Services. Currently, we have 1,296 planned works and 530 fault jobs raised with the contractor and 104 faults raised with the DNOs, which is the power boxes used to supply the power, covering all associated assets within street lighting. The planned works cover work ranging from realignment of columns, signs to full replacement, as well as illuminated signs and bollard replacement. We are still undertaking some works within the 5 working days on residential roads. However, for total clarification, this is to investigate and repair where possible. Some works are raised straight away on a 28-day replacement for new lanterns to be fitted, which then itself saves the initial 5 days for doing the investigation. Shropshire currently have 20,064 lamp columns recorded in the inventory. Kia this year alone on an ad hoc basis have installed 1,627 LED lanterns, undertaken 2,000 planned work jobs and attended 400 emergencies across the whole of the county. Of the 1,180 planned works raised, 930 of those exceed their target date. Of the 454 fault jobs raised, 388 exceed their target date. We are working extensively with contractors to prioritise jobs and improve the repair times with the additional resources now being brought in. All SOX lamps, the old style, which is 60% of our lighting stock, are now no longer manufactured for environmental reasons. So when a faulty new lantern is required, it places it immediately under the 28-day SLA service level agreement. Now, often the older lights were installed in areas at the same times, which means they will also fail at or around the same period of time. So it's not unusual to find several lamps out in a small area at the same time. The level of failures of the old SOX lights, as they are at end of life, coupled with resource issues, has compounded these issues further. During COVID, production of the LED heads halted, and this in turn has lengthened the delivery times of those LED heads. This problem is not in isolation to Shropshire Council. That has been a worldwide supply issue, and that has been reported in worldwide media. When we're drawing comparisons with other authorities, we have to be extremely careful with this, as it can be misleading. To compare an area like Shropshire with its size and rurality to a very small urban council, figures can be extremely confused. But I can proudly declare Shropshire Highways excels in many areas over other authorities, is often seen as exemplary in our methodology. Since 2014, we have been installing LEDs of various types. LED lantern prices were some 375% more expensive then than they are now. First generation LEDs are already outdated, and many councils that did a full rollout at that time are already having to replace them for the new technologically superior ones. Now, I'm not going to shy away or attempt to sugarcoat the fact that the service is behind, and it's certainly not been performing at the levels that any of us had wanted. With that said, As I explained the last time I answered the question around streetlights, we have now more resources in the guise of 2 new subcontractors working on the contract, and the rollout of LED fitting has started in earnest. I can assure you that we are monitoring these improvements, and there are very rigorous KPIs in place to monitor how these changes are improving the service. I am extremely satisfied with the working relationship with everyone involved in street lighting. Shropshire Highways, WSP and Kier work under the banner of the Shropshire Highways Alliance Partnership and work together to try and mitigate and resolve as many ongoing issues as quickly as possible. Now, I personally sit on the Alliance Board and can attest to the honest and collaborative working demonstrated in these meetings. An example of how the Highways Alliance is working effectively is evidenced in the significant improvements demonstrated over the past 2 years with highways repairs. In fact, Councillor Dartnell even commented at the last Cabinet meeting how much this has improved. The service and I am fully committed to ensuring that those same levels of improvement are clearly seen across the street light repairs also. As a portfolio holder, I'm only dedicated to providing the best service possible to the residents of Shropshire across all services that I am responsible for. Political point scoring is not something that interests me, and therefore I will always be as honest as I can. With that honesty, I will state we are working very hard to rectify the situation. This is not, however, an overnight quick fix, but I am reassured by the progressive steps we are taking.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall, and thanks very much for such a full response. Councillor Dartnell, do you have a supplementary?
Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Marshall, for your full and honest reply. I hadn't realised honesty was optional. I don't understand why there exists such long-standing faults though. Today's reply shows a minimum of 80% overdue. In my own division, one light has had its non-working birthday, and they're at least, they're way more than 11 now, actually, at least 10 months old. This includes no lights at all that's on and approaching what I consider to be a dangerous walking stroke designated cycle path. It's a crossing over a road with a 50-mile-an-hour limit. It's dangerous in full daylight, yet at night it is in complete and utter darkness at the moment. And that includes part of the cycle path as well. I would like to know how some lights remain out for so very long, and also to ask Councillor Marshall to reply specifically about the cluster of 40 lights in my division that he's aware of. Does Councillor Marshall's comment about first generation LEDs fittings mean Shropshire Council lights from 2014 are now to be replaced also?
Councillor Marshall.
Okay, thank you for that supplementary question. And just to point out, for me, honesty is never optional. It's a given. As explained in the previous answer, we are prioritising and looking at specific residential areas, okay, and we are working through those. As I also said, unfortunately, it is not a quick fix. We can't hide from the fact the service did get behind through several reasons, some out of our control, but we are prioritising. To actually look at Cabinet at specific issues, and as you say, I am aware of the one in your area, and as I've also said to you by email, that is on the list of jobs that obviously need completing, and there will always be those clusters that build up, and this can obviously compound people's frustrations because they were fitted at the same time. So to give you confidence, we are prioritising residential areas, we are severely looking at those, and we will be working our way through them as well.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. The only question I think perhaps wasn't answered was
About LEDs.
About LEDs, about 2014 LEDs.
Obviously, as the head fails, it would need to be replaced. We did start to roll out in 14, and some of those are the first gen ones, which will not be as effective. However, what will happen is if they do fail, then they will be replaced with the new technologically superior ones.
Thank you.
And they're easier to replace when the comments are already there for them. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Right, moving on to the next question, Councillor Julia Buckley.
Thank you. My question relates to the care home fee uplift. So this week, well, last week's delayed annual agreement on the cost of care is a critical decision for Shropshire care providers, in particular those non-profit providers who cannot cross-subsidise their activities, such as those supporting disabled adults. Can the Cabinet member confirm that this year's uplift will cover the 6.6% increase in the national minimum wage, as well as other inflationary cost increases? As a legal requirement for employers and in a sector with chronically underpaid staff, it's essential that our commission providers are enabled to pay social care staff an appropriate wage to work with dignity. Furthermore, what mechanisms can we put in place to ring-fence contractual uplifts to ensure it reaches the staff affected?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. To provide the answer, Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Buckley, for your question. I'm Councillor Cecilia Motley, portfolio holder today for Adult Social Care, Public Health and Communities. And in answer to your question, I would just like to confirm that there is no delayed response to the annual fee review. The decision usually falls in line with the budget approval timeline, and we are currently drafting the letter to confirm the position for 2023-24 for annual fee reviews. When the Council reviewed the fees for 2023-24, it's taken into account several factors: provider feedback and current challenges, the cost of care exercise, although limited to care homes with 65 plus years and domiciliary care for 18 plus years, demand and capacity in the market, benchmarking with other local authorities, the Council's budget and delivering the Shropshire Plan 2022-2025. The national minimum wage is part of the hourly rate or placement cost uplifted, which covers the national minimum wage set when we review the rates. We review and benchmark rates with our regional local authority neighbours, and our rates benchmark comparably with others. The Council cannot mandate that providers pass on uplifts to their staff. It is their legal duty to pay their staff at least the minimum. Complying with employment law is also a contractual obligation, and the Council does monitor rates of pay. In addition, in 2023-24, we will also be doing the following. We'll be working with providers to increase the use of technology and digital solutions, and working with providers to redesign the domiciliary care market to ensure growth, flexibility and coverage, and consideration of a future rural rate. Work with providers to review the usual rate for care home placements. The Council always encourages any provider who is struggling and concerned about their viability to speak to Council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Have you got a supplementary, Councillor Buckley?
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the response, particularly some of the commitments in the future to look around the rurality element of the cost. While the wording is really helpful, there's no numbers in here. I was asking you to confirm that the rates agreed would not take into account, but that they would cover the additional costs. So if national minimum wage adds 6.6% onto staffing, and if other costs, whether that be hosting a venue with energy or whether that be travel for domiciliary, those inflationary costs are at 10.1. If we just took it as a straight average, that's an additional cost of 8.35% for most care providers. So can you just reassure us today, please, that the uplift that's been offered to our providers is at least 8.35%? And whilst benchmarking is an excellent idea, it's only relevant if the neighbours, as we heard today from Councillor Marshall himself, if those neighbours are also rural neighbours who have the same additional pressures of dispersed populations as ourselves. Councillor Marshall will not thank you for comparing us with Telford.
I wasn't about to, actually, but thank you for that. Basically, we do not make these figures known publicly until we've been able to discuss them with the providers. And so that's why they haven't come out giving you precise figures at this time. You will be hearing what those figures are later when we're ready to publish them. We're not trying to hide anything, but we are very conscious of the fact that we need to discuss with our providers what we're proposing and have a really good talk through with them about it before it goes public. So that's why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Moving on to question number 4, which is from Councillor Rob Wilson, which I understand Councillor Evans is reading.
Thank you, Leader, Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Wilson sent me a copy of his question as well as we have it on the computer. Question. At the Place Overview Committee on Monday, the 6th of February 2023, it was clarified that development of the new Local Transport Plan, LTP4, stopped in March 2022. At the meeting, the Executive Director of Place said that the new LTP will be a transformational change from LTP3. It is a shift away from planning for vehicles into planning for places and people. The new plan has to be in place by spring 2024. LTP3 was published in spring 2011. Is the Council's decision making on transport still based on LTP3? Are there interim measures in place to bridge the transformational gap between LTP3 and LTP4?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Answer provided by Councillor Richard Marshall.
Thank you, and I can promise you this answer will be shorter than the previous one. The Provisional Shropshire Local Transport Plan LTP strategy 2011 to 2026, known as the LTP3, sets out a series of objectives that support three main goals: economy and growth, carbon reduction and environment, healthy, safe and confident people and communities. These goals remain key overarching considerations in decision making in the highways and transport service, in addition to a range of specific metrics used for prioritising forward programmes of work within individual work streams. In 2021, the government announced plans to issue new guidance on local transport plans. The launch of the new guidance by the DfT Department for Transport has been subject to delay and is now expected to be released as a consultation draft early in this year. The guidance is currently expected to focus on strategic priorities relating to levelling up the economy, reducing environmental impacts and improving transport for the user, which would include safety. There is a clear synergy between these priorities and the goals contained in the LTP3 strategy. It is anticipated that the new guidance will introduce a move away from predicting future traffic growth and providing for it in favour of a vision-led approach whereby local transport authorities can demonstrate how their transport systems can achieve better intended outcomes for people, goods and places. Prior to the announcement of the pending guidance, Shropshire Council had already started to use an approach based on understanding the access needs of people and goods rather than focusing on specific transport modes in the development of the next LTP for Shropshire. This adjustment in focus has been supported by the formation of a project steering group to enable cross-organisational thinking and the development of integrated policy that reflects the key role that transport systems have to play in maintaining sustainable communities and placemaking. The Place DMT, with the inclusion of myself, the portfolio holder, is the formal decision-making forum and accountable body for the development of the LTP, which provides the necessary governance to enable any realignment of strategic focus to take place. This puts Shropshire Council in a strong position to respond to the new guidance when it emerges.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. Roger, Rob sent you a supplementary.
He has.
Okay.
And this is, again, a message from Rob Wilson, who has apologised due to personal problems. He isn't here today to do it himself. Thank you. As you state, the local transport plan sits alongside the local plan, as well as the local development framework to deliver strategic objectives. LTP3 quoted directly from the 2011-2026 Shropshire Local Development Framework, saying, by 2026, quality of life for Shropshire people will have been significantly improved and Shropshire will have become a better place in which to live and work. Targeted improvements to the county's transport infrastructure will have taken place to widen transport choices and help reduce car dependency, improving accessibility and connectivity both within and beyond Shropshire. Strategic Objective 8 of the SLDP was to support the improvement of Shropshire's transport system in a sustainable and integrated way, and locate development to improve accessibility by quality public transport, cycling and walking, help reduce car dependency and the impact of traffic on local communities and the environment. The Shropshire Chamber of Commerce is calling for investment in non-car transport to be prioritised, as potential employees cannot currently commute to employment opportunities without a car directly stopping business from growing. 2026 is 3 years away, just 1 year after the next local elections. When will this administration actually deliver on its own objectives? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I must be feeling magnanimous today, because at one point I thought it was an essay rather than a supplementary question. Councillor Marshall.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And for what was an extremely long question, I've got a very short answer. The answer to all of Councillor Wilson's long question was contained in paragraph 1 of the original answer that I gave to him, when it's talking about the LTP3 setting out a series of objectives that support everything that he was saying with, which I concur with. They support 3 main goals: economy and growth, carbon reduction and environment, healthy, safe and confident people and communities. It also goes on to say that it won't look at one specific transport mode. So I think we've answered all of that in the original answer I've provided.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Okay, so taking us on to item number 6, which is report back from scrutiny, and joining us, if you'd like to come to the table, Peggy, is Councillor Peggy Mallock, who is the chairman for the People's Scrutiny Committee. Thank you, Peggy.
At the recent People's Scrutiny meeting, members were very concerned about the gap in the provision of psychological and emotional support, resulting in a waiting list for exploited assessments for our exploited children. Members felt this should be a priority to address this gap, and a request was made for the number of exploited children currently on the waiting list. I'd like to point out to Cabinet that Health have no data on the timeframe for mental health support for exploited children. We have a collective responsibility to ensure that we hold Health to account, and I would ask the leader and portfolio holder to raise this issue urgently with the ICS. There is a need to understand how Health are supporting these children. This will be reflected in Scrutiny's recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Peggy. I understand. I only listened to a small part of it, but I understand the meeting was a full debate, put it that way. Absolutely. Councillor Cecilia Motley and I will both bring that to the attention of our colleagues in the ICS. It's also been mentioned, of course, within the SEND report that came through, so there will be an action plan for that as well. So thank you. And thanks for the work the committee does, Peggy, too. Thank you. Okay, so moving on now to what can only be described as the Councillor Butler show. Item number 7, which the first one is the Financial Monitoring Report, Quarter 3. Thank you, Gwilym.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Gwilym Butler, Portfolio Holder for Finance and Corporate Resources. Leader, we present the report as stated. It shows a slight improvement on Quarter 2, but is still a challenge with stubborn high inflation and an increase in demand specifically around children's services. I know others will wish to comment, but I would like to say we understand that pressure, but it is the right thing to do to look after our children, and this council will deliver to its statutory responsibility, however hard it gets. We do understand the impacts and risk on the general fund, and we are permanently minded that we must ensure that improvements are made whenever possible to enable a sustainable level for the organisation. At this stage, I'd like to thank Ben Jay for the presentation he did to members on the financial resilience of the organisation and how it puts Shropshire Council against other councils in the same arena. And I think that information was invaluable. No more to be said, Leader. I move the recommendations as laid out in section 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwilym. Do I have a seconder for that report?
Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight, portfolio holder for children and education.
Thank you, Kirsty. Questions? Yeah, first Roger, then Julia.
Thank you, Leader Chairman. I note the report, and I'm not criticising anything to do with the adult social care and children's social care. It is needed. I think every council in the country is suffering. I do know that there's 37.4 full-time equivalents of agency staff there at the present time, which I don't object to. Well, I object to the numbers, but I don't object them to being there, because the staff who look after that must have only a workload that they can manage for the sake of the personnel involved. What I do find fault with is the last 14 years that this council has been run by a Conservative administration. It's been told time and time again that the budget is not sustainable. It is unsafe. And now that pack of cards is starting to fall down. And please don't just blame the adult and children's social care. There is £5.3 million unachieved savings within the Place Directorate. And if one looks at that in it, one will see that £2 million commercial savings now unachievable. £1.4 million delay in achievement of commercial savings. These are due to unachieved in future years. £1.4 million to leave an achievement of efficiencies within the administration buildings. And it also mentions that the full savings won't be achieved in full until 2026-27, when the council moves to new multi-agency hub in Shrewsbury town centre. They didn't even know a planning application had been put in. £1 million pressure projected as a result of unbudgeted inflationary pressures across utilities and maintenance. And it goes on. Shire services, nearly £1 million overspend there, after this cabinet introduced measures 2 years ago, which I objected to, which imposed large increases in schools, and the schools voted with their feet. And it has actually resulted in increases in it. And if one looks at the general reserves, which is mentioned in this, one will see that £9.95 million is the latest projected finish for this school this year, which leaves just £5.6 million in the general reserves. And this is after earmarked reserves have been robbed and money brought in to balance this year's budget. It is a pack of cards which has come down. I think this council looked on the fair funding formula for a long, long time. Even when the peer review said, please don't rely on it, it did. I think fair funding formula is dead. It isn't going to come in. There is a general election in 18 months. No government is going to introduce a fair funding formula in its last year of office. And also the levelling up, I think that is levelling down as far as Shropshire is concerned. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I share the very serious concerns, not just raised by Councillor Evans, but raised throughout the report about the detrimental effect on our general reserves of this rather large overspend. So, you know, it's written down that it's between 4 and 17 million, even at the best estimate at 9.95 million. It's a huge amount to be transferring at this late stage in the day of this financial year to shovel it across to try and balance the books. It's very worrying, because earlier in the report, we're told how pleased we are that the national settlement was better than we expected. So even in a better than expected settlement, we find ourselves with a devastating overspend. Throughout,
You want to use next year's money this year?
Throughout the report, we hear words that this is an unsafe level for our balance of our general reserve. We hear that there is acute pressure on the finances and that this has increased the level of financial risk. That's not just our own finance officer, that's also our external auditor, Grant Thornton, telling us as loudly and clearly as they can that this is unsafe, unsustainable and that this is a huge risk for the council. It needs to be escalated on our strategic risk register, and we need some explanation, please. What exactly are the mitigations in place to close this gap and to reassure us, not just for this year, but for next year, because we cannot continue on this road to bankruptcy.
Thank you, Councillor Beckley.
Right. Well, Councillor Hurst-Knight.
Yeah, I'd just like to come in on the children's overspend. There's a few things here that aren't going to actually show to next quarter. I think the important thing to highlight is the work that's been done with the team around agency staff. We're going to be at our lowest at the end of March, and we've been for many years. Our apprentices, well done, they're all qualified, and we've filled our posts for the Stepping Stones project. So that's gaining momentum. We were delayed with a couple of care homes with one brief configuration to incorporate our therapeutic hubs and the new build, which we've heard earlier with the leader how outstanding our homes are. We're doing them well. You know, we have increased the foster care allowance, and the campaign starts next week, so everybody can play their part in sharing the posts that we're going to put out there. But I think the main thing to understand is that the intensive work that we saw from the end of last year into this won't yet be recognised, but a lot of work is going on there. Councillor Evans, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst-Knight. Councillor Motley, no, Barbara Graham back in.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No. All joined.
Was just slightly confused by something that Councillor Evans said about fair funding. Now, you will remember that there was a great deal of discussion about fair funding before the Brexit situation kicked off. We were on the cusp of an awful lot of work that was done to demonstrate the need to uplift rural areas funding in particular, because the imbalance between the rural and the urban areas settlements was so acute. We were waiting for that. It was due to happen, so we were told. Then, unfortunately, there were a few changes of government and it fell by the wayside. But out of that, at least did emerge, and largely as a result of a lot of work by the Rural Services Network, the Rural Services Delivery Grant. Now, that was a relatively small amount of money, I will grant you that, but Shropshire has consistently been up among the highest recipients of Rural Services Delivery Grant. And again, we have been this year. We've got an extra £800,000, which does help us. But I think to use that, use the fair funding to say that we were relying on it, I think is actually inaccurate, Roger, unless you're talking about something else. I just thought I should clarify that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia. I mean, I think, if I remember rightly, I can't remember whether it was at the first council meeting or the second council meeting, but I do remember saying that this council couldn't rely on the fair funding agreement because we knew that it wasn't coming down the line. And actually that has been, if you read the press around the government settlement for next year, that has been acknowledged that the fair funding won't come through, and we've been given some form of assurances about next year, well, I say next year, the year after's financial settlement as well. So I'm not really quite sure what that refers to. All I would say, Councillor Evans, is that this cabinet, since May 21, has known very well what issues it's dealing with and the pressures that it's dealing with, and this is why we're going down the route that we are. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Leader. I think I might turn into a bit of a parrot today because I've got several reports and probably going to give the same answers for quite a few of them. Firstly, Grant Thornton didn't actually give us that advice. It was general information. It wasn't actually directed at us. It was general advice, just to be aware. It's disappointing, Councillor Buckley, that you weren't at the financial resilience briefing yesterday. I'm sure the slides are going to be circulated. But that actually showed that we do have a plan. We have the Shropshire plan and we have the MTFS. And that will actually show that by after the next financial year, it is predicted as our general fund reserves will be up to 40 million. And that will put us back into the real way this business should be. And ever since last summer, I've been talking about sustainability. Furthermore, I'm also very concerned that I read in the press, Councillor Buckley, that you are cancelling capital projects and then creating revenue spends against those capital projects, which could only be covered for 12 months. And I don't know how they'd be covered thereafter within a revenue situation. Leading on to that, Roger, I bent over backwards this year to give you an alternative budget process. And here you are telling us that we haven't got a plan, we haven't got a strategy, and we haven't got a way forward. I'd like to see yours and yours, Julia, because I can tell you now, we have the plan, we have the strategy, and we have the staff behind us, and we will move this organisation onto a sure and sustainable footing. And that's all the people of Shropshire need to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let you come back in March, Roger.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. We're talking about quarter 3. I'll talk about the plan for next year on the next item. But and the next item does refer to fair funding in half a dozen times within the papers. Peer review was done 3-4 years ago, and it said there about the fair funding. This council was quoting the fair funding was going to be done and would be introduced, not the latest peer review, the one before that, said there about the fair funding, and that's what I'm referring to. It warned then that it would not be possible, there, in their opinion, to ever deliver what was promised, and the council should not rely on it. It continued to rely on it, and in every budget up until this year, I think, maybe last year as well, but for the last 6 years, it's been saying fair funding, fair funding, fair funding.
Councillor Reynolds, I'm going to stop you there actually, because I think we can talk about the past all we like. This cabinet has only been able to deal with the situation since May 21. This cabinet has not relied on fair funding. In fact, absolutely the opposite. This cabinet has taken the view that we are in control of our own destiny, not expecting handouts from government. So I'm going to stop you there. Councillor Butler, did you want to come back in at all?
Just very briefly, to mention a lot of the slippage within the place situation around child services was around the COVID situation, the schools were closed, and also similarly about staff moving away from offices. So, and I'm not going to go into great detail, Councillor Evans. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I've been here probably as long as you have. And I know prior to COVID, when the government was in place, we were on the verge of getting fairer funding. We were. And it was only the COVID epidemic that threw it into the long grass. It was actually, I think, at the committee stage, Councillor Mocklin was. And it was only because of COVID. And so if you go back to the peer review prior to COVID, I think you'll find that we were still expecting fairer funding. And we did not get a response from central government. And it was all very cloudy, even coming out of COVID, what they were going to do. But we as a council took the opinion after our peer review from the LGA last year that we would not rely on fairer funding, and therefore we will be shortly presenting a future financial strategy, again, the parrot is out, that will create this council as a sustainable council moving forward. If you've got an alternative plan, an alternative Shropshire plan, an alternative MTFS, I'd love to see it. Thank you.
Chairman, just a quick one, and I didn't say it, and I would pay thank you to Cecilia for the work that she does with the rural things. And yes, the rural delivery grant has helped, and she has been there working it. So yeah, I pay tribute to that and the amount of work that was done.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Okay, I have the closer, I have the seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 8, which is the Treasury Management Update Q3 22-23. Councillor Gwyn Butler.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of reports this morning. Councillor Gwyn Butler, Portfolio Holder for Finance and Corporate Resources, that are basic housekeeping that we have to bring forward as best practice under SIPFA regulations, and this is one of them.
I formally just want to move the recommendations that members are asked to discuss about the position as set out in the report, in particular the continued compliance of prudential indicators and the Treasury Management Strategy. I move the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butler. Do I have a seconder to that?
Yes, Councillor Rob Ferguson, Portfolio Holder for Culture and Digital. Happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. see no hands in the room. All those in favour? Whimsical smile from James. He knew that that would be the case. Okay, moving on to item number 9, Financial Strategy 2023-24 to 27-28, final version. Councillor William Butler.
If only they were all like the last report. Leader, after consultation, we now have the final MTFS. I won't repeat the journey we have been on and our adoption of the Shropshire Plan, but the route is clear. Money will follow priorities, and this council will live within its means and become sustainable for the future in the medium and long term. I am so encouraged by the huge amount of energy we've felt from the staff, especially around getting leadership right, and their commitment to evolve as we create the council right for the people of Shropshire in a world moving quickly with digitalisation. Whether it is to enable people to live longer and healthier in their own homes, or looking after our vulnerable children, this strategy protects those at risk, but at the same time, we are not closing libraries, leisure centres or public spaces. We are also enabling our staff to develop and grow to evolve to the new local government and not making any compulsory redundancies. All this is led by the priorities within the Shropshire Plan. I won't shy away from the strategy. The next 12 months will be crucial and delivery will be key. And we will be following this on a monthly basis. In the last 12 years at least, we have spent year on year looking for savings and changing the organisation as government funding reduced. On delivering this budget, Shropshire Council, our council, will be sustainable in the medium and long term, and all that time and energy on annual savings can be directed into outcomes and policy development for the residents of Shropshire. Excuse me. I have been transparent as possible this year. An alternative budget proposal was brought forward and agreed by PMSC, Management Scrutiny Committee, following 2 meetings with no objections in the summer and undertaken this year. The consultation process was reviewed and retried, and I brought forward quarterly MFTS reports on a regular basis to Cabinet. Before I move the recommendation, Leader, I would just like to add that we are still waiting confirmation from central government and DEFRA particularly around food waste collection and green waste. So although the recommendation isn't here at this time, if we have had more information by the council papers, there may be a recommendation to remove the green waste charging from the budget, but I will update that at full council. Leader, I move the proposals 5.1 to 5.5. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwilym, and I'm happy to second that report. Roger, then Julia.
Thank you, Chairman. We will have a full debate on this full council, so I will keep this fairly short. But I note that we've got around, I haven't had it defined in actual pounds and pence, but 9% increase for all councils from government. We've got £4.5 million coming in from collection fund surpluses. And I also note in the budget that out of the £51 million savings, which is projected that the council will save next year, and I'm not sure how that is going to ever be achieved, I do note that £20 million of that will go into general reserves. So there's £30 million of savings to be made for it, and the other £20 million go into general reserves to push it up to the £30 million that Councillor Butler referred to. But as far as alternative budgets go, I presented an alternative budget, and Councillor Butler will remember it because he was a councillor at the time, on LED lighting. Fully costed, supported by the staff involved, by everybody there, supported by finance people.
Was that saving of 300,000, Councillor Evans, against 51 million?
That would save over £5 million now in today's money, plus all the climate saving that would have been done if it had done in 2017. Full paper, fully costed, as I say, supported by finance, supported by the officers involved, fully deliverable.
It wasn't fully deliverable because we couldn't get the lights.
Fully deliverable according to the officers involved. And they're the experts, not anybody else. I took experts. spend some time with officers, and they were prepared to do it, could be delivered over 3 years. Fully alternative budget, and the council turned it down. The majority, the administration turned it down. Alternative budgets, put one forward on the information that I, as an opposition leader, had, which was very, very little. No background, and to find savings and to do other things with it was very hard. To do with capital, I did, and I've not seen anything in here about the alternative budget that was put forward. You've ignored it, isn't agreeable, okay, whatever reason, but we will see in future years what will happen to this council with the budget that you are putting forward. Because this has been, the council has been built on shifting sands at present, and maybe not in the last year, but since 2009, when there was a lot of money came in, when it became unitary, it's all been wasted. Thank you.
Another history lesson, please.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Gwilym Butler. I, for one, would like to thank you for your honesty and transparency. I think it's rare to hear a Shropshire Conservative admit that they would like to cut £51 million of public services in 1 year. It's rare, and I appreciate that you're being quite honest at the scale of the devastation of the services that will be removed for residents in this county. In particular, although you don't give very much detail, the most vulnerable residents will be the ones whose services will be reduced or removed. I'm talking about special needs children and how they will travel to school. I'm talking about disabled adults who need assisted living. I'm talking about... I don't believe it's appropriate to interrupt. I believe it's my turn to speak. Is that correct, Chair?
Yeah, carry on.
I'll repeat. Disabled adults who need assistance to live at home, elderly residents who need care at home. We're talking about the most vulnerable residents in our county, and they are the target for your cuts. We have a saying in the Labour Party of what you guys like to do. It is death by 1,000 cuts. In your case, £51 million of public services. So, when you have finished with this, and it's in your own words, the only provision left in this county will be statutory services. In other words, you're only prepared to deliver that which legally you are required to do by minimum. I hope that you are comfortable and you're brave enough to stand up and be honest about what you were doing. I wish that that honesty had given more detail in the consultation process, because residents have contacted me to say that in the consultation online, that detail was not specified. It was not clear where the cuts would be and how they would be affected. And in particular, parish and town councils have contacted me, and I know some of you, to say that they were only informed about the budget consultation 3 days before the deadline. Now, most parish councils only meet once a month. So that is not acceptable in terms of ensuring that your grand plans for devastating cuts, that the news is spread far and wide, and that people have a chance to explain to you the impact of what you are planning. And finally, I want to tell you about some practical outcomes that are already starting to hit the council before you even bring this in, and that is your plan to delete vacant posts across the council, saving £1 million in every directorate. We sat at a committee meeting yesterday in which everybody, staff and members alike, explained the problems of lack of capacity, of lack of staffing, that they are 10% down in the team and they are therefore producing 10% less work, which is having a major impact on this council, both in terms of governance and reputational damage. Now, if you multiply that across every department, think of the damage that we are going to cause simply by not replacing staff. I've worked in public sector for 25 years. There is nothing less strategic than not filling a post when somebody goes away to have a baby.
Kirsty?
Councillor Kirsty has like portfolio holder for children and education. Just to be clear, it has been outlined before. We are not stopping send transport for children that have a statutory right to it. This must be made clear. We do not want to unnecessarily alarm families, which we had in the last meeting. We are looking at nursery age. It's not a statutory role, and we do not believe it is the best thing for moving children around Shropshire at this rate. We are looking at that, but just to be clear, no changes. If you have the right to transport, we will honour that. Thank you.
Can you clarify about excluded children, please? I don't know if you heard me. Could you clarify the position for excluded children? Children who've been excluded from schools.
It's the same principle. Thank you.
So they will not be protected. They will not have access to travel.
That's not what I said, Councillor.
Can you just clarify, please? It's a public
It's
meeting.
not a discussion between two parties. So
Clarity is really welcome.
we will get that clarity for you in writing.
Which has been sent before.
As been sent before, okay. Councillor Coward.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to go back a stage and a speech, if I may, to something Councillor Evans said about a previous alternative budget, in the same way that one swallow doesn't make a summer, one amendment doesn't make an alternative budget. And this is the same amendment that was floated out every year for, as I recall, 4 or possibly 5 years under the guise of an alternative budget, which it most certainly was not. Now, I don't say that the standalone business case for that at the time didn't stack up. However, as was pointed out at the time, the proposal to spend on LED streetlights at the time was a proposal to come out of the council's own resources, or to borrow commercially to do that. What we said at the time was, and what has since been proven the case, was that we could get Salix funding, interest-free loans, keeping the council's own capital investment fund and borrowing headroom to the Public Works Loan Board available for other capital projects, and saving on the interest repayments for that. And as Councillor Marshall said earlier, if we had have gone down that road in 2013, 14, 15, we'd only have to be doing it again in the next few years to replace those first generation LED lights. So I am getting mighty frustrated with hearing that was an alternative budget, which it wasn't, and that was a panacea, which it most certainly was not, for the reasons that have been rehearsed for probably the last 7 or 8 years of budget setting meetings.
Chair, reply to that.
No, you can wait 2 minutes because I'm going to speak first, would you? I'm really actually quite disappointed with some of the comments that I've heard to the left of me. Is that the far left, Leader? Is that the far left? Yeah. Well, the far left. To the left of me. I think the difficulty that I have is that when I sit and talk with other Conservative leaders across the country, the way we are working towards stabilising the finances for this council is not unique, but it's certainly being used in other councils as a bit of a, have we thought about doing this way? What some of my colleagues are doing, Councillor Buckley and Councillor Evans in particular, are slashing and burning. And that is something that I said right from the start of my tenure, and Gwilym said the same. It is something we do not wish to do. We could quite easily close libraries, close parks, close leisure centres, which other councils are doing, but we're not doing that because we're braver than that. We're more ambitious than that. We can see a way forward of transforming this organisation with the staff's backing that will make a radical modal shift for this organisation. The alternative budget process bothered me. And I'll tell you why it bothered me. Because like Councillor Butler said, and Councillor Carroll has mentioned, I didn't see an alternative budget. What I saw was a bit of a fudge around capital monies that may or may not have been available. We are looking to put this council back on a stable financial footing, which means securing savings, not cuts, but savings of £51 million. Nowhere in your alternative budgets did you even tackle that figure. Now that says to me one thing, that you do not have any idea how you can close that £51 million gap. So what you did was you came forward with a capital sum to use over the next, let's be honest, 12 months, because that's all it could be. Now, from my view, that says to me, either you don't understand the budgetary process, which I would think, having both of you been involved in public sector for so long as you have, that that's not the case, or you are deliberately misleading people, the public, by telling them that your alternative budget, and I've seen it in print, would actually have solved so many issues in Shropshire, when everybody around this table knows that that is not the case. What you put forward as an alternative budget was a nice to have wish list, some of which are, some good ideas in there, and we will look at those in the future, but nothing that solved the fundamental issue. This cabinet has been in place since May 21. It picked up a really difficult financial situation. This cabinet is dealing with that financial situation. If you had anything about you, you would work with us to ensure that we bring that gap back to stability for 12 months' time. I hope to God I never have to sit in opposition, but there are times when it must be brilliant, because you can chuck every rock, every brick, every bleeding heart story there is, but you never, ever have to do anything about it. Willem has proposed this report. I'm happy to second this report. Thank you. Councillor Evans, you wanted to come back on Dean's point about LED lighting.
Thank you, Chairman. I suggest Councillor Carroll visit some parish councils who put in their LED lighting 5-7 years ago and ask them what they have found. LED lights a 25-year guarantee in the majority of cases.
Thank you,
so
Councillor Evans.
The ones that are there, but can I just say about the alternative budget? Can I just say about the alternative budget? You haven't heard me really complain about what is there. The council, you as the administration, do have a hard job, but the job has been created for you by the last 14 administrations, the 14 years since 2009. You've created this, you and your previous colleagues have created this. We're willing to work with you to deliver, but we want to be involved, not presented with just a list of figures with no background, no depth, no knowledge of what the effect is. And if one looks at the actual efficiencies, it says review, review, review,
Councillor
review.
Evans, I'm going to stop you there because I've said to you once before, that's you marking my homework, not you providing an alternative budget. I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. And moving on to the next part of the Councillor William Butler show, the estimated, item number 10, the estimated collections fund out. James, could we improve the names of these reports? The estimated collection fund outturn for 22-23, Councillor William Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor William Butler, Portfolio Holder for Finance Corporate Resources. Again, this is a piece of housekeeping. We have to bring this report forward every year. I'm pleased to report that this actually shows how well Shropshire is actually going through the cost of living crisis. And I won't shy away, it is a hard time for lots of people, but the actual collection rates are holding up. So I'm quite confident that it will help us moving forward. But I would also like to put that message out there to anybody who is struggling with payments or mental health problems. Just pick up the phone, email us, do get in contact. We're here to help you. Leader, I just wish to move the recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Graham, and I echo that as well. Don't not get in touch with us. Seconder for that report, please.
Councillor Ian Nellens, I'll second that report.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Buckley?
Yeah, just to thank you for the report, Councillor Butler, and to pick up your point about those that are struggling. I know that you have done a lot of work with the cost of living working group, and it's really appreciated. And we've all helped distribute those leaflets to let people know about it. And I think that we should again, after March, when residents will receive their new council tax demands, but everybody's having 2 months off. Most people are having 2 months off council tax. If I could just request that we promote again in April the fact that support is available through that cost of living support, because I have to tell you, residents are contacting me, and you know, it's not people necessarily on benefits, is it? It's people in work who are now feeling the pinch, and for us to be clear about support that is available for people who are struggling to pay their council tax.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, there's a continuous focus on supporting that, really. I was pleased, and funny enough, Gwilym and I had the same experience. I went into my doctor's surgery yesterday, and they're showing the information on the screen, which is excellent. Councillor Butler?
Yes, more than happy to take that away. And I know you did bring things up in your alternative budget about further help to people. The conversations I've been having to date is that we want targeted support, and rather than doing blanket support, just giving it out to everybody, we want the people to contact us, because it's not just about when they contact us and make that handout to us, we can actually do a fact find on them and not just help them for what they're phoning up about, but we could insulate their house, we could do, you know, get other referrals to other bodies. And I think us being proactive the way we have been, if we have future funding, it needs to go into that pot for the hardship fund, so people contact us, but we can actually gear up the help for them by having that face-to-face contact or on the phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could just reply, I agree and understand the targeted support, and if you recall, our proposal was quite targeted for benefit recipients within very specific bandings. But there's another issue with waiting for people to contact you, and that is a lot of elderly people, as you will know, often have a lot of pride and are reluctant to come forward, even though they are perhaps in desperate need. So I do think we need to have a nuanced approach.
Can I just actually say that I'm exceptionally proud of the work Rachel's been doing, and the team of Phil Weir.
Yeah.
Because how many thousand people have we actually phoned up, Rachel? Off the top of your head? Over 5,000 people. Yeah. We haven't waited for them to phone us. And we've been phoning those people who are on pension tax credit, the people who are on universal credit, the people who are on council tax support, the people who've got disabled badges and we know are vulnerable. We haven't waited for them to call us. We've actually gone out to them. I think it's been an excellent service, and thank you, Rachel, and the team.
And I can't tell you how many people have actually contacted us to say thank you for calling them, which is, you know, and you're right. That's, I think it's been an eye opener actually for in some cases. So yeah, Rachel, thank the team, because I know that's a lot of phone calls. Okay, I have a proposal and I have a seconder for that report. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 11, Treasury Strategy 23-24.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Gwilym Butler, Portfolio Holder, Finance, Corporate Resources. Again, this is another housekeeping one to keep us in line with SIPFA regulations, etc. You can see the process that we have to go through there to Cabinet, to Audit, and then to full Council. And I'm just prepared to move the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Gwilym. Do I have a seconder for that one?
Councillor Richard Marshall.
Thank you, Richard. Hands in the room. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 12, fees and charges 23-24. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Gwilym Butler, Portfolio Finance, Corporate Resources. Again, fees and charges do actually make up quite a substantial part of our income. And we also have to remember that as delivering the service for which we charge fees and charges
in terms of cost, and like anybody else, our costs have risen, and therefore we have to increase our costs to ensure that we become sustainable, as we've been previously talking about. I note the revised social housing rents and affordable rents are capped at 7%, well below the current inflation rate. I hope that won't put too much pressure on the council revenue accounts, whilst we still strive to have better homes, better repairs, etc., etc. But I also feel for the people, you know, 7% increase is 7%. However, I'm aware that benefits are going up by, I think it's 11.1% on the 1st of April at the same time. Leader, I'm not going to go into any further details. It is what it is, and I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Willem. Do I have a seconder for that?
Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Thank you, Cecilia. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman. We'll have a debate at full council about this, but there's one thing in the report, and I assume it is a mistake. The charge for road closures is still shown in the report, so I presume that needs to be deleted at this moment in time.
Thank you, Roger. That shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, I agree, Roger.
Thank you.
I shall slap somebody's legs for him.
Oh.
Whatever. But what I mean, Chairman, it needs to be deleted before it goes to council.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, Roger. Thank you for pointing that out. Ben, I trust you heard that. You're online. Okay, so I have a proposer. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. Anybody like to switch the lights on? It's a little dim in here. We'll try to save money. Okay. You have instructions from the person in charge of assets, no doubt.
You've got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
9:99 to go.
Moving on to item number 13, you'll be pleased to know that item 13 is not Councillor Gwyn Butler, it's Councillor Rob Gittins. Rob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Leader. I thought I'll give Gwyn a little break. Overall, performance in Q3 is still positive. 21 measures and 5 key deliverables have been updated in the performance portal for this quarter. 5 measures show an improvement in performance, 7 measures remain the same, 2 measures show a decline, and 7 measures are not appropriate to report on. Overall performance across this basket of measures shows a slight improvement. An improvement, for example, on KSI data. So that's killed or seriously injured people on the roads. Rates did peak at 151 people per year, but have now reduced down to 122. Wage rates in Shropshire last year saw higher rates of increase than those for the Great British and West Midlands average for both workplace and place of residence. Q3 continues to present some challenges, especially around social and economic pressures impacting on our people, business and the council. Rates of looked after children continue to increase. The number of children looked after children continues to increase during the quarter. The numbers have increased from 647 to 669. It's a net increase of 22. Includes 5 who were unaccompanied asylum seekers. Seeker children, 56 children became looked after and 34 ceased to be looked after during this period. Despite these challenges, there continues to be areas of good performance. Annual weekly pay rates have increased higher than the regional and national rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Do I have a seconder for that one? Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Carroll, second. Councillor Evans?
Yeah, again, Chairman, only a quick one. I did note about the increase in looked after children, and I congratulate the council on trying to increase the number of foster carers and the extra money. And I think the more publicity we can give that, and I'm trying to see if there's any out there to do it, it will benefit the children and the council. So it does need to increase. But we do need more foster carers, and the more publicity the media can give to it, the better.
Absolutely, and I trust our colleague in the press who's sitting there at the back got that loud and clear. Councillor Hurst-Knight.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. It's just to let you know that we have got some sort of Facebook friendly posts that members can share, and that we are going to be sent out this week from the polls.
Yeah, there is a whole campaign being drawn up around this, Roger, because you're absolutely right. It's about best outcomes for the young people. Councillor Buckley?
Yeah, just briefly, it's a really welcome report. When we're looking at the detail behind the report on the portal, there are some measures there which are not included in the report. So I'm not clear which ones, make the grade and which ones don't. And I'm particularly interested in the homelessness strategy, which is marked down as needing improvement. Because it's been delayed, and this is a really vital area at the moment. I'm sure all members will have experienced what Kirsty and I are experiencing in Bridgenorth, which is an increase in rough sleepers, and it's causing a lot of distress in the community, and it's yet another inevitable product of the terrible financial situation. So can we have some report, some update on the homelessness strategy, and can some of these other additional measures also please make it through to your final report so members are aware?
With two things before I bring Councillor Carroll in to talk specifically about the homelessness strategy. I think you'll see over the next, certainly in the next few months, and that you'll hear me mention it in a moment, that there will be a lot more performance-related reporting going on, Councillor Buckley. So I think you'll probably be asking the opposite question in 6 months' time. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's a pertinent point, Councillor Buckley. I do know it's one that has been covered at cabinet meetings in the past. I admit I was a little surprised to see that this had fallen off of this performance monitoring report, but I think there are reasons that I can give you why it has been delayed and possibly why it's not included in the performance monitoring report at this stage because of those reasons. So the first thing to say is that the team that is working on the homelessness strategy is the housing and resettlement team. Now, what we've seen in the last 12 months that this has been outstanding from is they have been dealing also with the Afghan and Ukrainian resettlement programme. Now, that department has previously dealt with resettlement and refugee programmes. However, to give you some kind of an indication of the scale of the challenge of the last 12 months, going back to the start of the Syrian resettlement programme, programme, over the course of the first year, I think we received fewer than 20 households into Shropshire to work with. And I think in total, over the course of a number of years, that figure never exceeded at any one time in the county about 50 households due to relocations within the UK. The number of arrivals from Ukraine, given the terrible situation there, has been in the hundreds. I think at last count it was approaching or just over 800 individuals and well over 300 households. And so resource within that housing and resettlement team has had to be redeployed from writing strategies to delivering for the resettlement programme. However, when I say redeployed from writing strategies, that does not mean that resource is redeployed from tackling homelessness and rough sleeping. In that, back at last spring, I believe it was, the numbers of people in temporary accommodation was around 170. That has now come down, households in temporary accommodation was around 170. That's now reduced to around 120 due to that's in bed and breakfast, in inappropriate temporary accommodation settings like bed and breakfast. That has been due to the work that has been done by that self-same team in reducing the reliance on bed and breakfast and inappropriate places for people to be placed. So that work is ongoing. The other thing to mention is the work in supporting the rough sleeper community. That has never let up. I first got involved in 2017. So in 6 years that I've been involved with the housing department, that has never let up, and there have been peaks and troughs. What we see generally over winter is declines in those numbers of rough sleepers as the offer that is available for accommodation becomes slightly more attractive in terms of accepting the support that we insist people take up around
to enhance
that accommodation. So the individual that I believe you reference in the original has
You need to describe
received-
individuals.
No, but you did make reference to case, and I would say in defence of the team that they have been out to and made offers of accommodation to all of our rough sleepers around the county, including in Bridgenorth, repeatedly, and those offers remain open.
Yeah, okay. I could just reply, Lee, if that's acceptable. Could I just say how welcome it is to have that detailed explanation for the mitigation of the reasons why it's been delayed, which we would not have heard because it's not been included in this report. We need to separate out the why from the what. If we're going to be very serious about the Shropshire Plan, the fundamental principle is that you report regularly and timely on KPIs. We can't just dodge them when they are not successful. Can I just make a point that we've already heard Councillor Gitton say that, or Dean say actually, that we were surprised that actually that had come off of the report. But it would have said no. That's all we would have known. It wouldn't have given you any more detail. But that's it's still on the portal.
But that's the point, isn't it? Governance and assurance. We have to understand
what I said about having a lot more information available. Councillor Gitton.
You can't cherry pick which ones go in for reporting.
Yeah, look, the data is still there. Yes, it didn't make it into the report. We will take that away and look at why it wasn't physically in the report, but it is still a KPI. It is still there. It is still on the portal.
Absolutely. Okay. So I have a proposer and I have a seconder for that report. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 50. Sorry, that's number 14, isn't it? Item number 4, just skip yours, you've waited all that time. Item number 14, determination of admission arrangements 24-25, Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight.
Thank you. I've got 14 and 15, but I'll go 14 first. Okay, this should be pretty straightforward. It's the time of year again for our determination of admission arrangements for 2024-25. Again, in light of the recommendations, I'll try not to use lots of acronyms, for the local admissions forum which we work with, and in accordance with the Schools Admissions Code 2021 and the Schools Admissions Regulations 2012. This is a statutory duty that I'm bringing to Cabinet today to formally determine the admissions arrangement for Shropshire Council. It's just, again, housekeeping really, Gwilym, because we don't have any consultation to report on. There is no change to the admissions. And, in view of the recommendation from our local admissions forum, I'm happy to put forward the recommendation, in 3.1 that Cabinet approve and the admission arrangement for 2024-25 as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst-Knight. Do I have a seconder for that report?
Councillor and the other second that report.
Thank you. I see no hands in the room. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hurst-Knight, you may now do item number 15.
Okay, another pretty much straightforward housekeeping, working in line with the schools forum, lengthy conversations and discussions there with our educational professionals, and if they recommend, then I'm more than happy to recommend. If we're looking at the Shropshire Schools funding formula for 23-24, again, I think this is the 6th year that we've done it like this. It works. It's what schools want. The screen's just frozen. So I'm happy to bring forward the recommendation that using the national funding formula, that Cabinet accept the recommendation from the schools forum on the formula for Shropshire Schools for the financial year 2023-24 for maintained schools and for the academic year of 23-24 for academies.
Thank you. I think it's just the way you've got another report. I think the voice would have gone. I've got no hands in the room. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed, Kirsty. You can suck that possibly now. Moving on to item number 16, which is the ICT and digital strategy. Councillor Rob Hittins.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. If I could actually start by just bringing David Baker, who is the our new head of automation and technology. So what I'm going to do is just do things a little bit differently, whereby I will do a intro on the report, and I'll ask David to come in and sort of give some real life examples of sort of how what we're going to do is going to improve the council and improve services for the council and for residents. So basically, the ICT and digital strategy takes note of the advances in technology in recent years that have transformed how organisations in both the private and public sector operate and deliver better services, whilst also reducing their costs. The IT and digital strategy underpins our Shropshire plan and links and runs through the themes of the plan. So healthy people, healthy environment, healthy economy, and healthy organisation. Our headline priorities support a vision of a digital county. They are, number one, to safeguard and protect, to ensure that the data the council holds, the software it operates, and the transactions it enters into are protected as effectively as possible against the continually escalating cyber threats. Number two, to digitise and automate. So we're looking to pursue and promote a digital county in which as many transactions as possible are done through a digitally enabled route, such as end-to-end services, while also accepting that some transactions and individuals will be better served in the normal manner. Number three, to enable and develop. So to encourage residents and council staff to develop their ability to use technology and to be comfortable in doing so. So healthy people, for example, this can mean the Internet of Things. So to maintain independence, leading to online consultations and leading to better personalised care. In the healthy environment, this can mean the adoption of cloud services, which reduce energy use, reduce travel, and reduce paper. When it comes to the healthy economy, this can mean improved internet connectivity, supporting digital startups and digitally skilled workers. In regards to the healthy organisation, this will mean further adoption of good IT service delivery standards and digital end-to-end services. And technology is continually changing the way that people go about their daily lives, how they interact, learn, play, work, offering new exciting opportunities for the way Shropshire Council connects and interacts with its citizens and staff. The technical process is predicted to continue for years to come. The IC digital strategy will continue to support Shropshire Council in ensuring that both local residents and visitors to the county enjoy the benefits of the digital age, while those in digital poverty are not left behind. So at this stage, I'm going to sort of ask David to come in and just go through sort of some of the fantastic things that the IT is doing.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Dave, can I say welcome as well? So welcome to your first meeting with the Cabinet. Really nice to have you on board. So fire away.
First off, which button am I pressing?
Oh, yeah. That's not a good start, is it? It says automated mode, it should have come
Hello everybody, good afternoon now. It's been interesting listening to the conversations happening already. And actually, I think this strategy to actually fall into a lot of the problems that people have been talking about today, which is really interesting. So a couple of examples really. If we look to things like how do we reduce travel? So you could put smart lockers in libraries. So what does that actually mean? Well, at the moment, if you need a new laptop, what happens? You phone up the ICT unit, you say, I need a new laptop. This one's old, rubbish, not working. Same old stories that most people come to. Or I've dropped it, spilled my coffee on it, whatever it might be. But you have to phone them up. You have to request a new laptop. Someone then has to order that laptop if you haven't got it in stock. You then have to build it, get it ready, make sure it's fit for purpose, secure, got all the software on it that you need. We then have to arrange a time for you to come and collect it from here. All of this takes a significant amount of time. It's a wasted time, to be perfectly honest. So putting other technologies in, like smart lockers, means that actually we can already use a library distribution network because there's already someone driving around the libraries taking books everywhere. So why can't they take equipment with them at the same time? Put them into a locker. And actually, if you live an hour away from here, you don't drive, it's going to be very difficult for you to get here, isn't it? So, but you live a 10-minute walk from a library, you could walk to a library, we give you a code, put the code in, take it out of the locker, great. You can leave your broken one in there, and then it gets collected on that same journey. Also, we can do things like autopilot. So autopilot is basically a very fancy term for straight from manufacturer, straight to the end user. So it doesn't have to come in here. We don't have to set it up. We give our configuration to the manufacturer. Now, before anybody says, oh, is that secure, giving them that information? Yes, it is. Plenty of other organisations already do it. And effectively, they do all the hard work for us. It doesn't cost us any extra money. And they will actually ship it where we want. So yes, we could have some coming here for us to distribute through that locker system. But we could have some going, right, somebody lives, if they could live abroad. And we could send it across.
That is abroad. Yeah.
So using these technologies reduces the time that everyone's spending doing this, but also it's reducing travel and effectively making everything more efficient. Those are just two examples, really. The screen's locked out, it doesn't matter. It's not going well, is it?
It's all the more endearing, David, to be honest. I think
it makes it real, I think.
It does make it real. I think the point that David is making actually is going back to the reports that we've had today. It's not all about cuts. It's not all about savings. A huge amount of what we're looking at doing is about efficiencies, and it doesn't. If we take it in very basic, that not making somebody travel in 2 hours each way to pick up a laptop from Shirehall is at one end of the scale, but providing a looked after child with a really fabulous foster family, which is better for the child and not costing the same monies that it is in a children's home. There are two examples there of the savings. And I think, the savings that we can achieve through some of the digital stuff. I mean, I'll give you a really basic example, David. It might make you feel better. I am constantly paranoid every time I change my password on my laptop, which I don't have to do anymore. I end up losing my phone connection. But now, IT, they almost have a hotline. They just know they can sort that out for me. I don't have to come in here. It's done remotely. It's not about cuts and savings. It's about efficiencies. And there is so much in there. And the ICT stuff is so wide. It touches every single department, as Rob said. So, I'm really pleased that this has come forward. And the fact that you can't get in your laptop, David, is neither here nor there. Sort it out. But no, brilliant. I mean, and thank you. And it's good to have you on board as well. Thanks very much. Rob, have you got anything further to add?
Well, just to say, I mean, there are some other things around tackling, for example, digital inequality. So a really good example of this, myself, David and Ben were working very hard on essentially what is a Shropshire card. So that is essentially a gift card. So someone can go into a library, top it up by £50, just for example. They can go off to a leisure centre. They can use it at the Theatre 7. From the council's point of view, that is one cash transaction, not numerous transactions, but just one cash transaction. That helps us with that side of things, but also, as I'm sure David might want to come back in here, it's safer for the end user as well. I mean, David, you could just say how it's safer for the end user.
Yeah. So digital inclusion is a really big challenge because we could go forward and put all this fantastic, all singing, all dancing digital services in, but what's the point in having it if people can't use it? So we need to be able to make sure that we provide digital services that are so compelling for people that they want to use it, if they can use it. But for those people that can't, what do we do? So we need to find solutions for that and make those services equally as good. So I'll share a quick personal story with you. My father has macular degeneration. So he's registered blind. He can see, just not very well, but he's registered blind. So that means any sort of online service he doesn't trust at all. He doesn't do online banking, doesn't trust online banking. He uses email, but that's normally just to complain about things. But other than that, he doesn't like technology. And try as I might, I cannot convince him to use online banking. So always in the back of my head, I'm thinking, how can we provide these services that my dad would use? And the answer is things like this Shropshire card, because what would happen is you get a little card similar to your badge. You could go into a library and say, right, I want to put £10 on it. There's no link to your bank account information. There's no link to your personal information. All you do is you carry this little card around. But it means that now I haven't got to carry cash around with me. So I can walk into a library and say, actually, I want to borrow a book. That's great. Scan the card and it takes the 50p off your card. But that's a digital transaction now for us. But the person doesn't have to know anything about the digital technology. It doesn't matter if you lose the card, you've lost £10, but it's the same as walking down the street and losing £10 out of your purse or your wallet. So trying to find solutions like this means that actually we can work in a digital way, but bring people along on the journey with us. And I think it's really important that we keep that at the heart of everything we're trying to do, to make sure that, yes, we can have all these great end-to-end digital services, but it's important that we don't forget about the other people. And at the same time, let's see what we can actually do for them, because it doesn't mean we have to do it in the old way still. We can change it. And that's within our gift to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rob. Julia? Yeah, so thank you for the report, and particularly welcome the comments you're making around the digital inclusion. The last time we discussed it, we did bring forward those concerns. It's really welcome to see they've been met. The two things we were most worried about is that because it's digital by default, that people wouldn't still have the option to pay with cash payments, and I see that's been retained for those that have no other option, and we really appreciate you've done that. I see also, and I've heard anecdotally from my own library in Bridgnorth, that you're doing this digital skills programme targeting the over 55s. So again, that's really welcome. There's just one area left, and I'm really looking forward to you reassuring me on it again today, where the digitisation, we've sometimes gone a bit too far, and that's with electronic payments and car parking. It's great if that's a choice, but in those car parks where you could only pay with card, it effectively excludes some people who just don't park there. And particularly where we've got such a rurally dispersed network of humans and car parks, can you assure us that we won't ever have only electronic payments in our car park, so we keep both options?
I can answer that one, if you like, because I won't give you that assurance, because I think there are different ways that you can deal with payments in a car park. That doesn't necessarily mean, and David's point around his dad and doesn't trust online banking, that's a real issue. People don't necessarily want to be able to tap their cards. But in the future, and I'm not saying this is going to happen immediately, but in the future, you can get a prepaid, and I've done this, I think it wasn't Chester, it might have been Lichfield. You have a prepaid card. And basically, it's just like you said, you can top it up and you can just go in and prepaid or whatever it is. It's a prepaid parking permit actually in areas. I think the thing about the cash payments in car parks is that there are two sides to it. One side is we are still asking people to go out and collect cash on a regular basis, which I don't think we should be doing. And the other thing is that generally the people that have spoken to me in the car park, once I've shown them that there is a permit scheme available on their phones, they said they're not using their payment cards anymore. They use the permit. And there's really good reasons for doing that. Richard, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we're currently going through the car parking strategy, which falls under my portfolio. And I understand the concerns by some residents about it going cashless completely, and I do understand it. And in fact, it was quite funny to note that when that hit the media, it was probably the hottest topic that was going around. However, in looking at it and looking at what other authorities do, because I started to really delve into this, because paying cashless at a car park doesn't really matter to me. I'd prefer to tap my card. But when we were looking at it, you can do it with your bank card. You can do it with the My Permit. You could also, I'm sure, incorporate it within the Shropshire card that you're talking about, but it could be exactly the same thing. So there's a myriad of ways that we can do it where we're not reliant solely on the cash, because the problems you also get with the car parks with cash, the machines can only take so much money. So it can only take X amount of 10 pence pieces. Once the tube is full of 10 pence pieces, you've then got to either take that machine out, that it can't be cash, or you've got to send an engineer out to go and empty it, or somebody to empty it to get it going again. So there's a lot of on costs with using multiple services. But I do understand it, and I don't think it's something we're going to do next month. But I actually do support eventually us going cashless with the car parks, because there are many ways that we will be able to pay using, as you say, the Shropshire card, our bank cards, or the permit that we've got in the app.
I think it was unfortunate, Richard, that when the original item came out in press about the cashless, suddenly it was about the whole of the country being cashless, not just some of our services.
May I just respond?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you explaining this, but I do think that we need to have a bit more of a conversation about this, and in particular for us to join up with the current consultation around Destination Shropshire, so as a tourism location, because there's two different customer bases, aren't there, for our car parks? You've got our own residents that you know are 8 years older than the national average, so we are talking about older people like David's dad who might not want to have a prepaid card or phone up or use an app. But we're also talking about tourists who arrive. So Councillor Picton's example of having a card in advance that's relevant to a new area, that's just not going to work with tourists who arrive here for the first time. So can we join up this conversation, please? So we're talking about IT, we're talking about residents using car parks, but we've also got our mind on sustainable tourism and how we are welcome to tourists, because I don't know the answer. But I'm wondering.
I referred to the prepayment card as a way of people paying for parking who didn't want to use their bank card.
Sure.
Not people buying one in advance.
I'd be interested to know if the average age of our tourists might also be older, and for us just to be mindful of that whilst we're looking at these two things together.
Councillor Butler, then Councillor Marshall again. Did you raise your hand?
There's a lot of people with their mics on, so I can't put my mic on.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, I just like. I think if we do delve into the statistics, I'd be very interesting to know that how many car owners don't either have a debit or credit card or a smartphone. So
great idea. It'd be really welcome to know that.
I don't see much money changing hands in car parks these days. Oh, David.
There is an alternative, and that's actually don't have any payment meters at all. And what you actually do is use technology at the entrances to the car parks that scan your license plate and then send you a bill afterwards.
Wow.
So that way you wouldn't have to use any online technology. You could get the bill through the post afterwards. So you get billed after you've parked rather than paying for it at the period of time.
Yeah.
So that might be a solution.
you've got to chase up the bills.
Good point. Councillor Marshall and then Councillor Hurst.
Yeah, just quickly really to come back on what Councillor Buckley was saying. Everything that you mentioned there with tourism, the locals, etc., it's really at the heart of what we are doing as administration anyway. And I know I'm having regular meetings around car parking and what we are doing. And at the moment, we're looking at a business case that would support all of that, because we've got to accept there's quite a large portion people who park who do pay cash. So we're not going to alienate anybody, whether it be a tourist, resident, because all of those parts of the economy are really at the heart of what we do. So nothing is decided and set in stone. There's a lot of consultation, and we will develop a business case. So we come back to Cabinet, Council, whichever it needs to be, with a policy on that.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hurst, last one.
Very briefly, I'm not going to talk about car parks. Have you looked at the Stepping Stones Therapeutic Hub and the Weekend Wi-Fi? Might put on the spot here, but you were going to look at if there's anything you could do for that area for our staff and our children. Were you successful? Did you manage to do it?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hurst. Yes, we were. Shropshire Council Stepping Stones Centre has something, like you said, from a really poor internet connection of around, I think it was 2 or 3 megabytes per second. Recently, this has now been upgraded using the Starlink low orbiting satellite technology. The site now benefits from an internet connection of well over 100 megabytes per second, but this also shows that this technology can also be used and would be highly benefit those hard to reach areas, so those places like Cleveland, Mortimer. I'll have to get Elon Musk to stick us that's my favourite Cleveland for you.
He'll shoot it down.
I was just going to say, when you mentioned that, there was a few comments around white balloons, but we won't go there.
Yeah.
You've got the interesting ringtone.
It's Ed David.
Okay, so good debate. Good debate. I have a proposer. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. David, thank you very much. You may either stay or you may disappear off to wherever you're going. It's entirely up to you. We haven't got that many more items on the agenda anyway. So, okay, moving on to item number 17, which is the Shropshire Plan update. Very rarity. This is actually my report. So I'll be presenting this one. So since we adopted the Shropshire Plan last year, we have made significant progress, and this report gives details of that progress and our next steps. If I take you back to when I launched the Shropshire Plan at full council in May last year, I explained that this would be setting out the council's priorities, and I suppose unlike previous plans that gathered more dust than delivery, we needed to ensure that the resources would follow the priorities, and that the plan was alive and was central to all that we do, and most importantly was a plan that everybody could understand. And I don't say this lightly, but a plan that our staff could really understand. Obviously, the new focus is all the more important when taking into account the financial challenges we face and the scale of the task ahead to bring the council's finances back into line. A huge amount of work has gone into the Shropshire Plan, and especially the medium-term financial strategy, and I thank Gwilym and the officers for the amount of work that they've put into this. As I said before, we don't underestimate the scale of the task or the pace we need to deliver these objectives, but let me outline some of the work that has been completed. It's listed in 7.1 and explained in more detail in the appendix, and I don't intend to go through the whole thing line by line, but I do want to mention just a couple of things. The launch of the Shropshire Plan for our employees was a significant part of this process and involved everybody, pretty much everybody sitting around this table. The feedback from those launch events was extremely positive and continues to be positive, and the positivity has continued with the subsequent launch of the Getting the Leadership Right programme, which ensures that an initial group of 275 senior managers are equipped to deliver the plan. And I have been really, really inspired to see how staff right across the organisation have taken the Shropshire Plan to heart and are really clear in their focus on how they are working on the objectives of the plan, and most importantly, how they can improve outcomes for the people of Shropshire. And Rachel, I was reminded of this only last week when I met up with the Healthy Lives team, and their honesty and openness was refreshing, I have to say. It was an extreme. I was supposed to be there an hour. I was there for 2. But secondly, I also want to highlight the speed at which many of the service plans are being revised and developed in line with the Shropshire Plan and how we will operate in the future, i.e. the so-called target operating model. I never cease to be amazed at the staff commitment to delivering the best for the people of Shropshire and the priorities in the Shropshire Plan. And let's be honest, doing so within the constraints of the MTFS. As I mentioned earlier on, alongside all of this work, we're putting in place a very robust performance management framework to ensure that service plans are monitored, reviewed and adjusted as needed. And I'm also very keen that, like the performance portal, this work will be available for all to view, and a significant amount, if not all of it, available to the wider public. This is important because I want to ensure that openness, I want to ensure that transparency, and I also want to ensure that it is a living, breathing plan. It's not a plan that sits on the shelf and gathers dust. It's our roadmap. The Shropshire Plan is absolutely our roadmap, and I am pleased that the responses from the budget consultation, although not millions, but a huge increase of what we've had in the past, were pretty much positive, and that residents agreed with the plans in place and what our priorities were. So the next steps includes the finalisation of these service plans, especially those within the MTFS in terms of the medium-term financial strategy. Areas of change that are already in policy are being got on with as we speak. Those areas that require a policy change will be subject to further reports and Cabinet Council decisions and, if required, public consultation. The biggest risk to our plans is that we do not achieve the savings in the MTFS. It is vital that we do all we can to stop this happening. To achieve the outcomes of the Shropshire Plan, and in particular the medium-term financial strategy, requires a huge amount of work and energy from across the organisation. As the administration, I've said before, we do not underestimate this task. Following a detailed review of the work required over the summer and acknowledgement of the capacity and expertise required, our next step is to procure a strategic partner to help with the transformation that this plan requires. This partner will not only drive through the organisational shift needed, but also work very closely with our staff, upskilling them in the process. This, in my view, is investing to save. This is about getting the machinery in place we need to take this council to the next level. And I really genuinely recognise that wholesale change can be exhausting. And I'm sort of looking at the directors when I say this, but I know that our staff are already at capacity. I know they are working flat out, and they have been for years. It would not be right for us as an administration to simply heap more pressure on them. The partner will help provide significant resource and the expertise that frankly we just don't have in this organisation. This external support, capacity and expertise is vital to drive forward the change that we need. Not a nice to have, it's a necessity. In the short term, it will prove invaluable. In the medium and longer term, it will put Shropshire Council on a stable financial footing going forward. And I genuinely believe this, at the forefront and centre in local government delivery. It will ensure we have a healthy organisation which will be wholly focused on supporting a healthy population, a healthy economy, a healthy environment, and genuinely that in Shropshire you really will be living your best life. I'm happy to propose this report. Do I have a seconder?
You do, Leader.
Thank you, Gwilym.
Yeah, more than happy to second this report, and I'm not going to get the parrot back out, but it will be. It is the fundamental design of our medium-term financial strategy, and all we need to say is that finance will follow priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwilym. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. It would have been interesting to have that discussion before reading in the media that the council was spending between £1 and £3 million on a strategic transformation partner. No conversation has been had with me to my remembrance, and I've talked to people within my group. They knew nothing about it until they read in the paper about it. And I see the background about it. The council's cabinet and senior leadership began work on the programme. And I see in the report itself as well, it's a strategic transformation partner. In September 2022, the council commissioned a short piece of work. I wasn't involved with that, but maybe I'm not. Maybe it was the cabinet, maybe whichever. So, okay, but those outside the cabinet and maybe outside the administration know nothing about this. My colleagues created and complained about the £1,000 a day man when they came in to do the highways for it here. Here we've got a £4,000 a day organisation coming in to look at it. We have superb staff. I may be in favour of it, I may not, because I know nothing about it. I hear what you say, and it may be something that we could take forward, but at the present time, we just cannot understand when we start trying to save £51 million, making a number of efficiencies, I would say cuts, and we're spending £1 million this next year, and for 3 years, £3 million, £1 million a year over a 5-day working is £4,000 a day. And to try and justify that when we're taking money away from some of the others will take some doing. I haven't been involved in that discussion, and until I am, I'm against it. I appreciate what you said, and I will take that away and listen to it, but it would have been good to have heard about this before reading it in the media and seeing it here about the council commissioned a short piece of work at Ernst & Young, creation of new infrastructure, and it is being suggested to spend £1 to £3 million away on bringing in a set of consultants. The £1,000 a day man did a report, and to the best of my knowledge, most of that was junked. It was not used.
Okay, relax. Let's bring Councillor Buckley in. She hasn't got her. Oh, she has got her hand up. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, I'm afraid it is the same point. It is rather disturbing to see that £3 million will be spent on an external private consultant to advise this council on how to get rid of more staff. So the end of this process will be even more top heavy. And I'll follow it with a question, Councillor Butler, so that you can refute my complete misunderstanding. We see your vision of a council with fewer services. Does your vision end up with a council with fewer staff?
No. He's already answered that question, Councillor Buckley. So before I bring Mr. Angles
Can I answer it formally?
Yes, go on, Councillor.
We're not looking at fewer services. No. We're actually going to just be delivering them differently. And we're not looking at any compulsory redundancies whatsoever.
I didn't say, to be very clear, I didn't say that. I'm referring to the deletion of vacant posts, vacancies,
and
which will save £1 million per department.
Since this unitary authority has been formed, we have actually held approximately 3 to 5% of vacant posts year on year for the past 13 years. And we've actually held money back from going into services, and that level of post is never ever filled. It's just how a big organisation with nearly 4,000 staff runs. And I can give you a reassurance now that if EMT need posts to fill jobs that deliver statutory outcomes and other outcomes for people of Shropshire, they will be filled accordingly.
It's really important to have clarity between the two things that you're saying, Councillor Butler. You're saying previously we held vacancies, so the jobs were not filled, but they were on our book. Let's be very clear. Apart from the exceptions you just described, your plan is to now delete them, so we no longer have those posts.
We're not deleting specific posts. We're deleting the percentage that we used to hold.
You're deleting any vacant posts, so any random person.
Please, no, that's not what Councillor Butler has said. So, I'm not going to go over old ground because we've had this conversation a number of times. I will just ask Councillor, well, I don't know which one to ask first actually, but I will ask Councillor Marshall just to have come back on what they want to talk about highways, and then I'll answer your other questions.
Okay, let me assure you, Leader, I don't deal in anger, I only deal in pure fact. And never let the facts get in the way of a good story, guys. When I hear this constantly, and I've always heard it since I was first ever elected, it's a 1,000-day consultant man. It's the biggest red herring you'll ever hear. Okay, I'm not normally a great fan of consultants, and I'll be totally honest. I challenged this decision and the way we were going in formal cabinet, and I challenged it. But then the answers came back to me, and I actually agree with it, and I wholeheartedly support it because I can see the benefits of it moving forward. But let me just come back to your £1,000 a day consultant. Yeah, you say we've trashed most of it. If we look at the way that highways is operating at the moment, we are getting by far more for a lot less. All of our parishes, whatever political party any of us are, whoever we're aligned to, we all have to agree that the level of service within highway repairs is significantly improved. Now, that's down to two things. Firstly, we have got an absolutely first-class head of service. And secondly, the consultant that came in, a lot of the operating models that we are now moving to, he recommended. Okay? Now, I hear this continuously, this £1,000 a day. The amount of thousands of pounds that his recommendations have saved this council, but just put aside the money for 1 second, the quality of that service for our residents, which, as I said in a previous answer, that's all I ever want to do, is I want to give the best service for the areas that I'm responsible for. So please, and with the media here, I wish they'd go back and actually look at the benefits that came from this expert, I don't like the word consultant, this expert that came in and provided massive savings with massive improvements without any anger.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Carroll, do you still want to speak, or are you opposed?
I think Councillor Marshall has put it far more eloquently and far less angrily in time.
Okay, right. So, Councillor Evans, are you coming back specifically about a pothole?
I'm coming back about the arguments that were just put forward for 2 or 3 sentences. So,
go on.
I saw the report that went to scrutiny. I looked at it, and looking at that report, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of that report was never adopted. It might have been behind the scenes, but as far as that report goes, I can go through it there. It was into June. I've looked at it. So colleagues...
No point was discussing that, Councillor Evans, it's in the past.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I'll be quick, I promise. Just to point out, to put it down into pure pounds, shillings and pence, currently highways has saved around about £1.5 million per annum by the way that we're working more efficiently from the recommendations that were put forward from the consultant and also the quality of the head of service. Last word, promise.
Promise?
Promise.
Okay.
Pinky on.
Okay, so let me just come back on a few points that have been made. Firstly, if you do your homework, it's not at all unusual for councils when looking at significant transformation programmes, and I'm not awfully keen on that word transformation, but that's what it is. It's not unusual for councils to ask for external expertise. So let's be clear, in the past, consultants, and you've mentioned it yourself, Councillor Evans, they've come in, and who was it said to me? It was our deputy leader who said, you know, they borrow your watch and tell you the time. This is not what this is about. This is not a consultant. This is a strategic partner who will actually be coming in to do a lot of the work because we don't have the capacity to do it, and in some cases the expertise. So it is not unusual, and councils of every single colour do this, and I can name a few that are not blue that have done this recently. I also put it back to the very basics, and I'll be brutally honest with you, both of you. You look at it as £1 million over 12 months. Don't look at it as £3 million over 3 years. I very much hope that we will be looking at it as £3 million maximum, I hasten to add, over 3 years. But if we don't do this, there won't be a year 2 and 3. Simply, there will not be a year 2 and 3 because we do not have the capacity or the expertise to deliver that change at pace. And just to put it into some sort of context, and I love all this. It's £4,000 a day. It's £3,000 a day. We are looking to save £51 million. And let's put that in a real context that you can understand. If you're spending 5,000 quid on putting in a new bathroom, are you really not going to spend the 300 to get the plumber in? Because that's what this is about. This is about machinery. This is about nuts and bolts and taking this organisation to the next stage. We cannot not move at pace. We absolutely have to move at pace. Looking at a situation like this was recommended in the peer review. It's come out of a number of different reviews that we've had. We need that external expertise to work with us and push through this, and I'm not going to call it transformation, you'll hear me say it, to push through the shift in this organisation that is required. So you can look at it, we've said very clearly, because we have a plan, we know where we're going, we believe that it will cost between £1 and £3 million over 3 years. But if we don't spend that money in the first year, years 2 and 3 will not take place. And it's performance related, thank you. They're not doing it for nothing. And can I just pick up one thing? I do apologise, Councillor Evans and Councillor Buckley. I didn't realise that I had to put everything that we intend to do as an organisation through you to check that it's okay. Now, I'm sorry to put it as bluntly as that, but basically, why would I come to you and go through every single little piece of detail?
Point of order, Chair. Any spend over £1 million does need to come.
And it will come to council.
After the event?
No, it will come to council.
before you appoint them.
Yes.
So when it says you've commissioned a piece of work,
No, that's a different piece of work. Which I think, if I'm right, can I say how much that little piece of work was with Ernst & Young? Is it about £15,000? So I think that's slightly below the level that needs to go to cabinet or council. And we deliberately did that piece of work to see what the advantages were and the disadvantages to us working this way. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I was moderate in my answer to your proposal about it. It would have been a lot harder without your speech introducing it. What I really object to is the words in it which says the council. I'm part of this council. The way I read about it was in the media, not in a report or anything like this. The media reported it first, that the council is doing that. That's where my real complaint is. And without the background information, do you expect me to sign what, in effect, is a blank cheque for £3 million? I need to know what's behind it. It is the cabinet. It is the Conservatives who are in the majority. If they want to be open and transparent, they need to talk about it. And it's like the alternative budget. It came to myself and the other opposition leaders, and all the opposition leaders had not enough information to really put forward any alternatives, as was expected. Councillor Butler will disagree with me, I know, but that was independently, and the opposition leaders did not talk about amongst themselves for it. We are where we are. That's in the past now. We need to take it future. The council is facing a bleak future, and we need to operate and deliver to our residents a better method of doing those services in order for Shropshire Council to be here in 2 or 3 years' time. I think everybody's agreed with that, but really we need to do it together.
Well, can I just say that's the first time I've actually heard you say that we are all part of this council, because most of the time you act, and forgive me whether I'm going to be blunt, you act as though actually it's nothing to do with you and any of the other opposition groups. It's all the Conservatives. You can't have it both ways. So, you know, I give up.
Can I just say something?
Yes, Councillor Butler.
Roger, I hear this, and I'm of an opinion, and I stand here to support my officers, because my officers, I have James and I have Ben and I have the whole of the finance crew, and I will not have that said by you that you have not had the opportunity. I have spoken to officers who have worked in many, many organisations around this country, and they can't understand why we're being so generous. So if that isn't the difference and the transparency, it is the pure fact that you haven't got an alternative. You've had all the information. We've got the plan. We know where we're going, and you're not bringing anything to the table. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
if I may, if I can just repeat that, we did bring some things to the table, and you've even conceded you'll be exploring some things that we brought.
But they didn't touch the £51 million budget deficit in any way, shape or form.
Our proposals generated net savings in revenue, and as you know, we won't discuss it today, it's a rabbit hole, but we both have one large project in capital that we would have saved.
Oh, and I'll come back to what I said before, and I will say it again, and I'm not taking any more comments after this. Either you don't understand revenue and capital, or you are deliberately misleading the public.
Yes.
There is no other
have to
solution.
pay for capital.
Thank you very much.
Have
indeed.
repayments on capital, and interest rates have increased.
Right, I have a proposer for this report. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 18, which is the Church Stretton Neighbourhood Development Plan Neighbourhood Area Proposal. Councillor Richard Marshall.
Thank you, Councillor Richard Marshall, Portfolio Holder for Highways and Regulatory Services. Thankfully, a very brief report. Church Stretton Town Council have applied for the parish area of Church Stretton to be considered as a neighbourhood area for the purposes of preparing a neighbourhood development plan. It is the responsibility of Shropshire Council to decide if the proposed neighbourhood area is an appropriate area for the purposes of preparing a neighbourhood development plan. This report looks solely at the extent of the area to be used in the preparation of a neighbourhood plan. It does not deal with the contents of the proposed plan. which will be issues to be considered by Church Stretton Town Council in cooperation with Shropshire Council. The area recommended is shown in Appendix B of the report. So I therefore move the recommendations in 3.1 that Cabinet agree the designation in Appendix B covering the parish of Church Stretton as an appropriate basis for the development of a neighbourhood plan and notifies Church Stretton Town Council accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder for that?
Councillor Nellens, I'll second.
Thank you. I don't see any hands. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. I know Church Stretton will be really happy about that. Okay, moving on to item number 19, which is the exclusion of press and public. I'm happy to propose that takes place. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Nellens, second.
Thank you. We will now pause until, yes, all those in favour? We will now pause until the live recording stops and we get rid of Rob, who's already left the room.
He may come back here.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he did last time. Let's see.
You did that again.
I feel like somebody should be providing some entertainment for those still watching.
What's that Queen one?
Don't stop me now.
Yeah, we could. That's the way.
Maybe the deputy leader could bring his guitar in next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.